In our last videos about Google Colab, we created some variables and then we talked about the outputs of the code. Now we're going to look at arrays and how to loop over them inside of Google Colab. So for this, let's connect to the runtime first. You see that I've clicked here. It's now saying connecting, and it should connect me to one of the CPUs available on Google Clouds. So now it's initializing. All right, so now we are connected, and I'm going to have a new code block here, and we're going to start with the arrays. So first of all, I'm going to paste in here two different kinds of arrays. I have another screen. Actually, I've pasted an entire cell, so I can delete the one at the top here. All right, and now we have a one-dimensional array. It has 10 elements. I'm calling it R1D. And here I have a matrix, a 2D array. So this is one array, this is another array, and together they are inside of this array. So that's a 2D array. When I run this code, nothing happens, but actually in the background, these two variables here have been stored as arrays in the runtime, meaning that now I can actually perform operations on them, even though I'm in a new code cell. Let's try and do something without creating another variable. So in this case, I have pasted something here. This is a form of looping in Python. First of all, we have the array here. And then for every element inside of this array, which we are referring to as I, we want to perform something. So here we are multiplying all the elements of R1D by 5. So when I run this code, we get the results here. This is the output array. So remember here we had R1D from 1 to 10, but here we have R1D from 5 to 50. So this is not exactly R1D, it's just the values of R1D multiplied by 5, because the original array has not changed. Remember when I said that we are not storing anything in a variable? That was true, because here I'm simply performing the calculation, but I'm not storing the results anywhere. So when you perform a calculation like this, the results are going to show in the output like here, what you see below, but the original array is not going to be changed. So if I try to print the contents of R1D, I still see the contents from the original array. Now I've pasted some code again below this code cell. I want to perform something on my 1D array, my one-dimensional array, and I want to store some outputs in my two-dimensional array. So here I have for x in R1D, meaning for every iteration from 1 to 10, I want to verify if the value of x is an odd value. So if it's 1, 3, 5, and so on, if it is, then I want to create this small array where I multiply the value of x by 3 and by 5. It's an array of 2 elements, and I want to store that array inside of my 2D array. My 2D array is this one here, R2D. So here I want to append the result to my 2D array. If the value of x in R1D at the current iteration is an even number, that's why we have this else statement here. If it's an even number, then I want to get this array where I multiply the value of x by 4 and 6, and I store it inside of my 2D array. When I run this code cell, nothing happened again because I did not print anything to the console. If I use the print function in Python, then I can print something in my outputs. Or if I try to call a variable even, then I will see the outputs. But in this case, I didn't do anything like that. I just performed the calculation, and that is why nothing is showing here. But if we try to print the contents of R2D, now we'll see that it has changed because we actually called the append method on the R2D array. Anyway, we've already run that cell. I'm not going to run it again, otherwise it's going to append more values to my 2D array, and I don't want that. We've already run it once, so let's try and see what our 2D array looks like. So at first, we had R2D with only 2 values, 10, 20, and 30, 40. But now, when I print the contents of R2D, we have these original values, 10, 20, and then 30, 40 here. But we've also appended 10 more values, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. because we looped through our R1D array 10 times and we performed this logic here. So now we have more values appended to our 2D array. So just for you guys to understand, when you run calculations like this, any form of computation, if you've not stored it in a variable or you've not called any methods or function to change an original value, then whatever is printed here is simply an output. And it's not going to modify your original entity, whether it's an array or a variable or whatever. But in this case, I call the append method, so my 2D array has changed. Okay, so now let's try to check the type of R2D, because sometimes you're going to have values from external libraries and so on, and you want to check what is the type of the entity. So in this case, R2D is a list, which is correct. As you can see, in Google Colab, it's very much the same thing as having your own IDE in which you run your Python code. But in this case, we're just doing this online on Google's platform. Now, what I have here is I have one line of code. It's an import statement. I want to import the NumPy library as NP. So when I run this, you won't see anything in the outputs, but in the background, the NumPy library has been imported in this notebook. So this means that now I can create a NumPy array using my existing 2D array because the runtime is still connected. So my 2D array is still accessible. If I were to shut this down, then we'll lose all of our values, of course. So now let's try and create a 2D array. And by the way, if you're new to machine learning, you should know that NumPy arrays are commonly used when we are analyzing or even working on AI models. So now let's run this code. NP2D is now a NumPy array in our system. So let's try and print NP2D, and I'm just calling the name of the variable, and you see here that we have our NumPy array, which contains all the values from the original R2D. And when I say the original one, I mean this one here, because we've already modified it. So now to prove the point that this is in fact a NumPy array, I'm just going to print the type of NP2D. And when we do that, we have numpy.nd array. Here at the top, when we printed the type of R2D, we had list. So this is very much a Python IDE, kind of, in terms of the features that it has. But of course, it's in the form of a notebook, and the runtime means that you can access and modify values to your own liking. So that's it for these videos. We looked at looping and arrays in Colab. In the next video, we're going to look at images.